Imagine a tense war scenario where uncertainty hangs over a kingdom about to suffer an imminent massacre. The enemy forces, numerous and relentless, advance with the intention of destruction, and despair begins to take hold. However, in the darkest moment, something extraordinary happens. A heavenly angel sent by God appears on the battlefield. What follows is an epic scene of divine power, where this angel defeats no less than 185,000 soldiers, thwarting the plans of destruction and ensuring the survival of the kingdom. In this video, we will see all the details of this war. So, get ready, click the like button, subscribe to the channel and follow the story. In the turbulent context of the ancient kingdoms, a remarkable figure emerges in the reign of Judah, King Hezekiah, son of Ahaz. He assumed the throne at the age of 25, around 7 to 15 BC, after the death of his father. However, more than a simple dynastic succession, Hezekiah stood out for his deep commitment to the God of Israel. From the first days of his reign, he demonstrated an unwavering devotion to the Lord. His first major action was a vigorous campaign to purify the temple in Jerusalem, aware of the importance of this sacred place. Hezekiah dedicated himself to removing every trace of idolatry present in the temple, destroying altars dedicated to pagan gods, and removing the idols that had diverted the hearts of the people. But Hezekiah did not limit himself to destroying the idolatrous elements. He also promoted true worship of the Lord, establishing practices and rituals that reinforced faith in the God of Israel, restoring the spiritual purity of the temple. His fight against idolatry was not just a formal gesture, but a sincere reflection of his heart. His zeal for God was evident, for he did not hesitate to confront the practices that had diverted the nation from its divine purpose. His leadership not only shaped temple worship, but also inspired spiritual renewal among the people of Judah. A curious story involves a bronze serpent raised by Moses during the Exodus, as recorded in the book of Numbers. The serpent was associated with divine healing, as those bitten by poisonous snakes could look upon it and be healed. However, over time, this serpent became an object of worship known as Nehushtan. Rather than being a symbol of trust in God's power to heal, it became an idol, violating the fundamental principles of worship of the one God. When Hezekiah began his religious reforms in Judah, he made the courageous decision to destroy the bronze serpent. This action not only broke with idolatrous practices, but also reflected his unwavering trust in divine providence. By cleansing the temple and abolishing idolatry, Hezekiah not only restored true worship, but also paved the way for divine intervention in his life and in the nation. The Lord responded to this act of faith with blessings, showing himself to be a God who honors those who seek him with all their hearts. Thus, Hezekiah's story is not just a chapter in the narrative of Judah, but a lasting testimony of how sincere commitment to God can bring transformation and divine intervention. God has the power to transform not only the life of a king, but also an entire nation. Hezekiah's legacy of faithfulness reminds us of the importance of placing God at the center of our lives and our societies. However, the worst was yet to come. During a time of political turmoil and constant threats, the imposing shadow of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, loomed over Judah's borders. It was a time when nations were defined by military strength, and Sennacherib led Assyria, one of the most feared powers in the world at that time. The Assyrian army, known for its cruelty and effectiveness, posed an imminent threat to neighboring kingdoms. In his quest for expansion, Sennacherib mercilessly advanced through the cities of Judah, leaving destruction in his wake. However, his focus was fixed on the pearl of the region, Jerusalem. Hezekiah, the God-fearing king, found himself cornered by the Assyrian threat. Seeking a peaceful solution, he tried to persuade Sennacherib to give up his invasion of Jerusalem. In a desperate move, he offered a significant tribute, mobilizing the treasures of the temple and palace of Jerusalem. The tribute was colossal, 10.5 tons of silver and 1 ton and 50 kilos of gold. This offer not only reflected the great material wealth, but also the depth of the desire to preserve the holy city. In his quest for peace, Hezekiah was willing to sacrifice priceless treasures to protect his people and his capital. However, Sennacherib's response revealed the arrogance typical of conquerors of the time. Disdaining the offer, the Assyrian king openly defied both Hezekiah and the God of Israel. His defiant words were echoed, claiming that just as the gods of the conquered nations had been unable to stop him, so too would the God of Israel be powerless in the face of his onslaught. This affront not only escalated tensions, but also solidified the need for divine intervention. Faced with the rejection of his attempts at peace, Hezekiah turned to the only source that could guarantee deliverance: prayer and trust in the Lord. Amid the imminent threat of Assyria, Hezekiah faced a period of great uncertainty and doubt. The biblical account describes his initial reaction of anguish in the face of Sennacherib's ultimatum. He tore his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth, traditional symbols of mourning and despair in Jewish culture at the time. Hezekiah's heart was in deep despair, but his faith remained steadfast. As the shadow of invasion loomed over Jerusalem, Hezekiah chose not to give in to panic, but rather to raise his cry to the God of Israel. Rather than succumb completely to fear and uncertainty, Hezekiah took concrete action. He went to the temple of the Lord to worship, seeking divine presence in the midst of adversity. This attitude reflects Hezekiah's understanding that even in the face of such a formidable threat, his primary trust and refuge should be found in the Lord. Furthermore, Hezekiah did not hesitate to seek divine guidance through the prophet Isaiah. He sent a delegation to the prophet dressed in sackcloth as a sign of humility and supplication. It was in this scenario of anguish that the prophet Isaiah, chosen as God's spokesman, delivered a divine message to Hezekiah. Isaiah, instructed by the Lord, brought words of comfort and the promise of deliverance. The prophet's message was like a balm to Hezekiah's afflicted heart. "Do not be afraid of the words you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed against me. I will turn him back by the same way he came." Isaiah, speaking on God's behalf, offered divine assurances of protection. The God of Israel would not remain indifferent to the pleas of his faithful servant. The promise was clear. The city would not be delivered into the hands of the king of Syria. The God to whom Hezekiah had turned in prayer was about to manifest his power in response to the trust placed in him. Isaiah prophesied that Sennacherib would return to his own land and be defeated by the sword in his homeland. This prophetic message not only calmed Hezekiah's heart, but also strengthened his faith. Even in the face of the immensity of the threat, the king chose to trust in the word of the Lord, proclaimed through Isaiah. This trust was not based solely on military strategy, but was a total surrender to the God who controls all destinies. The next day, the walls of Jerusalem stood tall under the growing shadow of the Assyrian army, led by Sennacherib. Yet as the city prepared to face its greatest trial, a heavenly chapter was about to unfold. In the darkness of the night, while the silence was broken only by the distant murmurs of the Assyrian camp, a divine intervention was underway. The Lord sent his angel, a heavenly figure wreathed in light and power, to confront the army that threatened his chosen people. The angel, an emissary of the Almighty, hovered over the Assyrian camp like a divine sentinel. In a single night, this heavenly being defeated 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. The heavenly battlefield was beyond human comprehension, and victory came not through military strategy, but through the supernatural power of the angel sent by God. This miracle was not limited to military defeat. It was a tangible manifestation of divine care and protection. The promise made through the prophet Isaiah was being fulfilled. The God of Israel had not only heard Hezekiah's prayers, but had acted with incomparable power to deliver his people from the Assyrian threat. As the inhabitants of Jerusalem walked through the fields that had once been occupied by the enemy camp, they came upon a stunning sight. Where the tents of the Assyrian army had once stood, now lay 185,000 lifeless bodies. This was a graphic demonstration of divine power at work during the night. The silence that enveloped the defeated camp was broken by murmurs of amazement and gratitude. Every corpse bore witness to the supernatural intervention that had transformed the imminent nightmare into an undeniable miracle. The faith of the people, which had endured a night of apprehension, blossomed in the light of the morning, now illuminated by divine victory. The citizens of Judah not only contemplated the traces of the miracle, but felt deep in their hearts the victory over the Assyrians. It was not won by military strategy or human strength, but was a visible manifestation of divine favor. That morning became a living testimony to the faithfulness of the God of Israel. Sennacherib's fate took a surprising turn. The leader of the Assyrian army managed to escape, but despite the magnitude of the miracle, his end was not as grand as he had imagined. After his failed attempts to conquer Jerusalem and his mockery of the God of Israel, he returned to Nineveh. However, while he was in the temple, Sennacherib was assassinated by his own sons, Adramelech and Sarezer. Although the details of this event are not entirely clear in the historical narrative, the Bible relates that during an act of worship, Adramelech and Sarezer attacked Sennacherib with a sword, taking his life. This shocking event demonstrates that arrogance and unbelief can lead to a tragic end. In the sight of God, no one goes unpunished. Divine justice unexpectedly overtook Sennacherib, highlighting that no king, no matter how powerful, can escape God's sovereign control over life and death. This tragic outcome reveals that mockery of the Lord has serious consequences, and that divine sovereignty cannot be challenged without facing repercussions. After the victory over Sennacherib and the withdrawal of the Assyrian forces, Hezekiah suffered a serious illness. The Bible records this situation in the second book of Kings, chapter 20. Hezekiah became so ill that the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz, came to him and announced that he would not recover and should prepare for death. Faced with this news, Hezekiah once again turned to the Lord in prayer. He reminded God of his devotion, integrity, and faithful service, and tearfully pleaded with God to remember him and reconsider his situation. In answer to Hezekiah's sincere prayer, God sent Isaiah back to inform him that Hezekiah had heard his plea. God decided to heal Hezekiah and added a sign as a guarantee. Isaiah instructed that a paste of figs be applied to the king's wound as a miraculous sign. Hezekiah's illness was cured and he was restored to health. Furthermore, as an expression of his mercy, God promised Hezekiah 15 more years of life. This extension of time was a direct response to Hezekiah's fervent prayer and devotion to the Lord. This story highlights not only God's healing power, but also his willingness to hear and answer the prayers of his faithful servants.